compensation and benefit as per employment law. This is the topic that we'll be discussing in this presentation. Remember, as far as compensation and benefits are concerned, everything has been governed by the law of the land, and it will differ slightly here and there with every political boundaries that we come across with. That is exactly the country's law that has been in effect out there. For this particular presentation, we will be talking about a FLSSA or Fair Labor Standards Act, probably one of those act or one of those standards which is almost universally followed. I have deliberately obligated certain aspect of FLSA just to ensure that there is a worldwide acceptance to the compensation and benefits as per the employment laws are concerned. And we will be talking about the employment laws which are more or less universally present, omnipresent elsewhere. So major provisions that we will be covering in this particular presentations. Remember the provisions that are there in FLSA, and that is the reason why I have not utilized the term called agenda. I would love to cover the coverage about it, the youth employment, the minimum wage, the record keeping, and the overtime procedures as far as the compensation and benefits are concerned. Remember, everything would be only in through the prism of reward management, incentive, wages, salary, anything and everything that encapsulate compensation and benefit thereby. As an employment relationship, what is it? We are talking about employer and employee. This is what needs to be the nomenclature as far as FLSA is concerned. Anybody who considers to be an employee would be getting some sort of remunerations from the employer who actually is employing their skills, abilities, time, and effort thereby, as the case might be. So, in order for the FLSA to apply, there must be an employment relationship between employer and employee, as has been the statement. So there are two types of coverages. One is an enterprise coverage and one is an individual coverages. So mind you, in an enterprise coverages, it is as an organization as a whole, we are looking into it, and all employees, every employee is employed by that organization is entitled to FLSA protection. Whereas an individual coverage, not as whole as enterprise, definitely not. However, individual employees are covered and entitled to FLSA protection thereby. In case there are domestic help that has been taken for a chauffeur that needs to be employed, and so on. So, where an individual is actually employing the services of another person, probably, and that is what the individual coverage is. It is not as extensive as an enterprise or an organization coverage is all about it, but definitely there is a relationship of an employer and employee between the two entity as case. Let us understand enterprise coverage. A business, a non-profit organization may also be covered under FLSA, as in named enterprise, as in a neutral term that I've been talking around it. It is a government enterprise, it's a non-government enterprise, it's a social enterprise. You name it, and we are looking into it. So, named enterprises include hospitals, residential, medical, or nursing care facilities, schools, preschools, and government agencies are covered regardless of average dollar values. The sales that we go around it, ADVs are average dollar values that we come to go across with. Must afford minimum wages, overtime, and protections to every employee that is being present until and unless specifically comes under the exemption category, as the case might be. So employees of the business not covered on an enterprise basis must still be covered individually. Definitely, that's what we are talking about in an individual employment basis. So absolutely, there are no economic entity, there are no financial entity, there are no liabilities. But then an individual is employing the services of another individual for the purpose of meeting his obligation or her obligation thereby. The employee's activities, not the establishments, determine the coverages. Individual coverages applies on a work week basis, as the case might be. This is what we need to understand. So, individual coverages should engage interstate commerce, the production of goods for interstate commerce, or an activity that is closely related and directly essential to such production. Remember, domestic services include home care. Employees of non-profits may also be covered individually out here, and that is what we are looking forward to it. So let us understand what does interstate commerce precludes or includes as such. So it's basically making an out-of-state phone calls. Obviously, if you are making an expensive phone calls, it has to be reimbursed. Receiving interstate mails, electronic communication, ordering, receiving goods from the out-of-state suppliers. You have those responsible position when it is coming from outside your state or your provincial residential place, provincial government. So handling credit card transactions, performing accounting, bookkeeping for such activity, everything that needs for to do with traveling and transportation and probably receiving invoices, inventories, goods, and so on and so forth. So wherein there is a sense of responsibility, wherein you are acting on behalf of somebody else and the good faith that needs to be covered as an individual coverages as the case might be. In fact, it will not be an exaggerated if I say that almost all employees in the US, United States, is covered by Fair Labor Standard Act, as the case might be. What we are looking out here. So employees who may not be covered include those employed by small construction companies, small independent retail or service businesses, as the cases might be. Almost everyone is covered, but there might be few exceptions. These are completely on a project basis and a very temporary basis. People have been hired for a month or two or something like that. It includes small construction companies and probably independent retail or service business, as the case might be. So let us understand one of the major things that comes for employee employment relationship is wage. And remember, we are talking only about compensation and benefit. So first and foremost thing, what is to be covered and what is not to be covered is what needs to be taken into account. As the case might be, calling around it. So covered not exempt employee must be paid at least the federal minimum wages. Now, the wages that has been stipulated by the federal government as such in cash or equivalent, free and clear of all hours worked in lieu of the number of hours that has been worked. So every country, every federal government, every central government, if I may say so, has a minimum wage requirement that is to be administered to which ensures that people are living a life with some sort of dignity. So you, as an employer, have to honor that minimum wage that needs to be taken into account, and that is what we are looking forward to. Now, this minimum wage should include, or the compensation should include, salary, hourly basis, or piece rate basis, the commission, certain bonuses. Often in the restaurant business, the hospitality business, in other businesses which is service oriented, tips received by eligible employees up to $5.12 per hour, where the employer takes a tip credit. Now, what is a tip credit is wherein the employers might be paying a little less salary. Probably when I'm talking about less salary which is below the minimum wage, in lieu of for the fact that there has been a tip which has been made where the employees can actually make more money, or should I say they make more money than the minimum wage that has been demarcated. So there is a tip credit which goes to the employer. Now, how does it help the government? Definitely, whatever credit that the employer gets, the employer has to pay little less than the stipulated payment. So it's a win-win situation for him. How does the government get? The government comes to know what kind of economic activity has been the output has been created, and most importantly, whatever has been credited to the employer would be duly been taxed. So it's a win situation for the government, win situation for the employees, win situation for the employer. Reasonable cost of room, boarding, if you are providing accommodation, facilities provided by the employers to the employee benefit thereby, and that is what we are looking forward to. So let us understand as lodging and boarding credit which towards the wage. There are five requirements that must be met. The first is the lodging is regularly provided by the employer or a similar employer. The employee is voluntarily, and there is no forcing around it, to accept the lodging. The lodging is furnished in compliance with the applicable federal law. If it has to be fitted with a geyser, probably hot water supply. If it has to be duly air conditioned as in what has been required. You have your establishment at difficult places which are extremely cold, or places which are extremely hot. You have certain minimum criteria or certain compliances that has been demarcated by the provincial government, if not the federal government, and you as an employer has to honor them. The lodging is provided primarily for the benefit of the employee rather than the employer. The employer maintains the accurate record of the cost incurred in furnishing the lodging. And why? Because the employer can take a credit for it. When the employer is actually filing the tax returns, can absolutely take a credit for it. And that is what is known as a lodging and boarded credit towards wages. We will talk about the deductions. Deductions from pay are illegal. Now, what are the deductions which are illegal? For example, items that are primarily for the benefit and convenience of the employer, wherein the employer benefits and not the employees. Deduction reduces the employee's earning below the required minimum wage. This is what is most important. No wonder what wage you are administrating, and if you have a huge deduction, which actually, despite paying a high emolument, the take-home salary or the take-home wages falls below the minimum wage. It is illegal. Example: illegal deduction for tools, damage to the property, cash, register shortages, and so on and so forth, that needs to be taken into account. Just an elaboration for that minimum wage. Let's say an hourly rate for a gentleman or a lady is $8. Weekly, he or she works for 30 hours. So 8 into 30, the employer required uniform cost is again 30. This is a cost that needs to be maintained for the employees to come in a proper attire, right? It has to be washed, it has to be ironed, it has to be pressed, and so on and so forth. So earnings would be 8 into 30. 8 being the dollars, number of hours, and number of hours is 30. So 8 into 30 will be $240, less the uniform charges of 30. Why? Because this is again been deducted. Now the employer might be washing the clothes or probably recycling the clothes as on the when on basis. The uniform that I'm talking about it. So, what does it mean? 240 minus 30 will be $210. But what does the minimum wage requires? Minimum wage is $7.50. Remember, $7.25. Sorry, $7.25, which is the minimum, and what has been paid is $8. So you are actually paying higher than the minimum wage. When it is multiplied by 30 hours, it comes around $217 and 50 cents. Now, what does it in effect? One comes around it. The employee earns $210, which is approximately $7.50 less. So this is illegal, despite making everything in provisions. The minimum wage being $7.25, you are paying $8, but because of the deduction, which brings down the uniform wages below the minimum wages, and this is what should not be tolerated. So, tipped employee engaged in occupation in which he or probably she customarily and regularly receives more than $30 per month as a tip. So this might be in hospitality industry, it might be in a hospitals, it might be any gardening trips, any service sector where people actually enjoy tips, or there is a customs of providing tips, since if the work is been done in a very nice fashion or as per the expected level. So again, it is applied on an individual basis, which we need to go around it. Minimum wages, the tip credit, FLSA is Fair Labor Standard Act, which tells you the minimum wage, minus you deduct the cash wage paid. So your FLSA minimum is $217.50, minus the cash wage paid, whatever your cash pay. It can be $200, it can be anything that goes around it, can be $250. Whatever is an excess amount is your tip credit that goes out. The employer may claim that tip credit if employee inform of the tip credit allowances and amount of wages claimed as tip credit. Employer documents sufficient tip received to bring the total wage to at least a minimum wages level, as the case might be. There are various sources of documentation. You can also pay your tips on an online fashion, probably, yes. You can add it do your credit card bills and probably demark it and give it as a tip. Tip shared by the employees, not shared with employer and other employees, except in valid pooling tips arrangement. That is what we look into it. So let us proceed with the minimum numbers of work that hours now needs to be worked around it. The person is supposed to work a minimum number of hours and a maximum number of hours, beyond which it becomes a little bit of an exploitation. So employee must be paid for all the time considered to be hours worked under FLSA. This include time spent engaged to wait, on call, in training or traveling, as well as sleep time. Work not requested but suffered or permitted is a work time, as the case might be. This is what we are talking around as a number of work hours. So minimum wages are hours worked and not hours worked. So what are the hours worked? Employees are able for a waiting time, probably waiting for a client, absolutely, or probably waiting for a process to get over. There might be some glitches in the software, some glitches in the production process. Essentially, been waiting until unless before he or she actually embarks on their job. Waiting time controlled by the employers, wherein the employers actually ask you to wait and probably wait for a certain period of time before the event finishes. Can you only begin your event? Not the hours worked. Employee completely released from their duty. Now, this is something which you are not waiting. You are completely free to do and pass your time as per your requirement. Break time long enough for the employees to use for their own purpose. These are not the work hours as such. So, what you need to understand with the waiting time as far as the minimum wage is concerned. Remember, as far as on-call time, hours worked, the employee must be staying on the employer premises, obviously within the organization boundaries of the wall. You need to be on the watch list. It is the number of hours that you're putting in, or must be so close time cannot be used effectively for the own purpose as the time comes around it. So on-call time was not hours work. Employees must provide contact information, as the case might be. Absolutely can use time effectively for own purposes. Now, this is what we need to understand exactly how it goes around it. So you need to say employee must provide the contact information in case he or she is not on the premises of the organization, can use the time effectively for the own purposes and not answerable to the employer at that point of time. Then we have the rest and the meal period is a short rest break, breaks approximately 20 minutes or so. Compensable, but beyond that, not. Bona fide meal period, typically not beyond 30 minutes or half an hour, need not be paid as work hours. Workers must be completely relieved of the duty for meal period and not be compensated. Or it's not a compensable time, as the case might be. So talking about a training time, now there are issues where people are engaged in training. Why? Because either the organization has demarcated it or recommended it, or the employee itself believe that this training will upgrade their skills and probably enable them to be a better worker. So time spent in meetings, lectures, training is considered worked hours and must be compensated for until and unless attendance is outside the regular work hours. Regular work hours is your work period, 9 to 6, 9 to 5, 10 to 4, whatever your work period is all about, or 10 to 6. And I'm talking about the general work time that has been done. So attendance is voluntary. Absolutely, yes. There are no mandatory requirement for attendance. Course and lectures, meeting, not job related. Absolutely not job related. You must be looking into different things. Maybe you're having a meeting on a union basis or something, certain things. Employees does not perform any productive work. Yeah, definitely, yes. If there are meeting which is not related to the work, you are definitely passing your time and probably having your own interest being of the prime or urgent requirement. Why? Because now you are not actually on the company's watch list or working for on behalf of the company thereby. So training time should not be including these things. So travel time, ordinary home to work travel is not compensable, neither from work to home back. Travel in between job site during normal work days or work time, that is definitely you are on the prowl, you are on the move on behalf of the company's work, and thus compensable work hours. Special rules apply to travel away from employees' home community as the case might be. And then we have this called a sleep time. Shift of less than 24 hours. Absolutely less than 24 hours. Employees on duty for less than 24 hours is considered working even if allowed to sleep as on when on required basis. Now, what do we look into it as engaging the personal pursuit? No sleep time deduction is permitted. What happens when there is a shift of more than 24 hours? The parties can engage in a bona fide sleep period. Now, this is up to the 8 hours and only if certain conditions are met. So, when you are working in the premises and you are working for 24 hours at a shift, so probably can exclude approximately 8 hours of the shift period, but rest of the 16 hours definitely you got to be compensated for. A shift of 24 hours or more for workers who do not permanently or probably extended periods of time resides at the employee premises. The employer and the employee can exclude the hours worked up to 8 hours spent on sleeping. So rest of the 16 hours definitely it has to be on a watch list or on a payment list. So the employer furnishes adequate sleeping facilities. The employees can usually enjoy 5 consecutive hours of uninterrupted sleep, and the employers and the employees have expressed or implied agreement to exclude sleep time as on when on basis. So hours worked summary, let us come to the conclusions part of it. Now we are talking only about the hours work summary. We have a little longer presentation today. Suffered or permitted, worked off the clock, waiting time, which is engaged to wait, on call time, not free from duty, are definitely on the employer's control. Meal and rest time, not free from duty. Training time, unpaid training works during the work time. Definitely yes. Travel time, unpaid travel between the job sites. And sleep time, deduct for sleep in less than 24 hours of shift. Now, what are the common violation that comes around as far as minimum wages is concerned? Number one, compensation included. Requirement, minimum wage in cash or allowable equipment. Deductions are illegal deduction, and I have glorified this illegal deduction in the previous example that I've just mentioned. Minimum wages are not being paid in the name of deduction. Tipped employees, tips not retained by the employees, cash wages not being paid, and hours worked, work suffered or permitted, not recorded or paid as the case might be. Usually, how do we calculate when people are working on an overtime basis? The usual function is 1.5 times. So if I worked an 8-hour shift, I will be paid 100, let's say $100 per hour. So that means $800 per hour. But if I work another 2 hours extra, I will be paid 1.5 times for work. So 150 plus 150, $300. So in that particular day, $800 for a regular work and $300 for 2 hours of work time. That end up as $1,100 that I work for that particular day. And this is just a proxy example for you to understand. Covered non-exempt employees must receive 1.5 times the regular rate of pay for all works hours worked over 40 hours in a work week. All time that is hours worked must be counted when determining the overtime hours as and when on basis. So overtime is compliance determined by the work week. Remember, each work week stands alone. Remember, work week are 7 consecutive 24 hours period. And I am not into the days countation as in which day of the week we are talking about it. 7 consecutive 24 hours period, and that is 168 hours in culmination with one another. And that is what overtime would always be. Then we have the RR. RR is the regular rate. So determined by the total earnings in a work week being a 40 hours thing by a total numbers of hours worked. So you are talking about, did I say about the shift of 800 rupees is a regular rate, or sorry, 100 rupees is a regular rate, wherein you regular rate for an hour. So you have a compensation of 800 by the numbers of work is 8, and the regular rate becomes your $100. So regular rate may not be less than the applicable minimum rate. Remember, I have just given an example to elaborate or stress upon my point. But as a matter of fact, regular rate should not be should never be less than the minimum wage, and it should be in excess of the regular wage, if not equal. Total earning includes commission, certain bonuses, cost of the room, boards, other facility provided primarily for the employee's benefit thereby. Exclusion from regular rate is a gift, discretionary bonuses, payment for time not work, reimbursement for expenses, profit sharing plans, stock options, retirement insurance plans, contributions, overtime, and minimum premium period that we are looking into it. So this is what the gives discretionary bonuses, payments for time not worked being taken care of. Overtime is effect of improper deduction. Improper deduction from salary may result in a loss of exemption during period in which improper deduction may for employees in some job classification, for employees working for middle managers, making improper deduction, isolated or inadvertent improper deduction will not result in the loss of exempt status. Remember, if employees are reimbursed as the case might be, and that is what we are looking for it every now and then, and you should ensure that there are no improper deductions thereby. Talking about the safe harbor. Now, exemptions will not be lost if employer has clearly communicated policies prohibiting what is to be deducted and what is not. What are improper deductions, including the compliant mechanism. If there are any issues, you need to give them how to resolve. What are the grievance mechanism that is built in place? Reimburse the employees for improper deductions. Definitely yes. Make good faith commitment to comply in future. If employer willfully violates policy by continuing improper deductions after receiving employee complaint, it cannot claim the exemptions from the affected employees as the case might be. And that is what we are looking forward. White collar exemptions of professional duties, primary duty, performance of a work required advanced knowledge in the field of science or learning customarily acquired by a prolonged course of specialized instruction. Performance of a work required inventions, imaginations, originality, or talent in recognized artistic and creative field as the case might be. And this is what we are looking forward to. So overtime is white collared exemptions. People who are doing a white collar jobs in the field, let's say in the field of science or research or development, occupation recognizes a professional status as distinguished from mechanical art or the skillful trades that comes around it. What are the exemptions thereby for the white collar jobs? Let's say the doctors, the registered nurse, registered or certified medical technologies, 3 years pre-professional study in accredited college, the dental hygienist, as in 4 year professional and professional study in accredited college or university, or a certified physician assistant. That is what are overtime which needs to be exempted because of these white collar professions. Now, I will like to give you an incomplete list of white collar professionals. I'm talking about lawyers, I'm talking about teachers, accountant, pharmacists, engineers, actuaries. Actuaries are life insurance who are actually making provisions for what is the amount to be insured for. Chefs, certified athletic trainers, licensed funeral directors, and embalmers, as the case might be. These are the professional duties. Basically, yeah, and the exempt professionals, I'm talking about it. So exemptions for employees paid commission by the retail establishment. Now, what is employees exempted from overtime pay if they employed by a retail or a service establishment? More than half the employees' total earning in representatives are basically on the commission basis, on the commission of the goods and the sales of the goods and services thereby. Total compensation is divided by the number of worked hours or a regular rate and exceed 1.5 times the minimum wage that comes around it. And this is what are the conditions which has to be met, and exemption do not apply to it. Again, reading this for your convenience. Employed by a retail or a service establishment, more than half of the employees' total earning in representative period are commissions on goods, services. And the last one, total compensation divided by the number of hours worked for a or regular rate exceed 1.5 times the minimum wage. And these are the retail establishment which have been coming under exemptions for the employees thereby. Establishment is a retail or a service establishment if at least 75% of the annual dollar volume of sales and good or both is not for resale, is recognized as a retail sales or service in a particular industry as the case might be. Exemption for the employees paid is the representative period. Representative period may be as short as 1 month, cannot be greater than 1 year. Employers select representative period. More than half of the employees earning during the representative period must be in commission, and that is what we are looking forward towards it. Exemptions for employees paid commission by retail establishment. Usually, this is what we are looking into. It's your total earning divided by the total number of hours. If that earning is more than the minimum wage which is 1.5 times. So your minimum wage can be $10 into multiplied by 1.5 times is $15, right? So this can be your minimum thing, and total the earnings will be $10, probably $10 or $100, should I say, and total number of work hour is six. Probably six. So what does it comes around it? It comes around approximately $17 or something like that. $17 is more than $15 as a minimum wage. So this is where you are actually looking where the regular rate is more than half, 1.5 times of the minimum wages, and that is what which needs to be exempted by the commission. So regular rate is failure to include production, bonuses, shift differential. Piece rate determining the regular rate for calculation OT is overtime. Compensation due, combined hours, rate for dual jobs, failure to combine all the hours in the dual work around, and the tipped employee, failure to calculate the correct cash or overtime correctly. Common overtime violations are white collars exemptions. Now, this is where there is certain categories which have been exempted, but what happens is when you have misapplication for the exemption, or the improper assumption that all salaried employees are exempted. That's wrong. Deductions, improper deduction on overtime weeks, misclassification, improper treatment of employees as an independent contractor, hours worked, failure to record, pay all the hours worked, state laws, confusion between state and federal laws as the case may be. So we talk about youth employment, federal youth employment, rules set for both hours and occupational standards as far the youth is concerned. We have the youth employment for the teenagers, absolutely 16 and 17 years, unlimited work hours, may work in occupation rather than those declared hazardous by secretary. Certain work which are completely no go for the underage people, or should I say the teenage people of 16 and 17 years old. Definitely yes. For 14 and 15 years, they can work outside the school hours, not within the school hours for a limited period, and should only be in the non-manufacturing, non-hazardous job. Specific condition that needs to be taken into consideration as the case might be. And children under 14, with limited exception, no employment is permitted. When I say limited exceptions, there might be certain fallacies that a person might be going through on their personal life, probably family issues. Otherwise, it is illegal to employ children below the age of 14. So record keeping, the last topic for the presentations altogether is when an employer subject to any provisions of FLSA must make, keep, preserve certain record, time clocks as to when people are checking in and when people are checking out, so that number of hours worked can be calculated easily. If every cover, employer must keep a basic record of each workers with additional requirements for non-exempt worker. Basic record that covered an employer must keep for each non-exempt workers include full name, sex, DOB is date of birth if younger than 19, regular rate of pay, total number of hours worked, total daily or weekly straight time earnings. That means 24-hour period that we are looking into it, consecutive 24 hours period, total overtime compensation if any, and deductions, date of payment and payment period thereby. With this, we come to an end of compensation benefit as far as the given law is concerned. I believe I have been able to give you a true picture of what is an employment law and what are the stringent things that needs to be followed with respect to compensation and benefit. Thank you for watching this video.